We like to believe that thinking is a virtue, that reflection is a sign of depth, intelligence, even moral superiority. From childhood, we are praised for thinking ahead, thinking deeply, thinking critically, as if the mind were a clean tool designed to guide us safely through existence. But nobody warns you what happens when thinking stops being a tool and becomes a place you live in. There comes a moment when thought no longer clarifies the world, but thickens it. You do not arrive at truth. You arrive at layers. Layers of interpretation, doubt, irony, and fatigue. At that point, thinking is no longer an activity. It becomes an atmosphere. Bukowski never romanticized this state. He did not treat thought as enlightenment. For him, thinking was closer to an illness you learn to manage rather than cure. When you realize there is no light at the end of the tunnel, the first reaction is panic. The second is denial. But the third, the most honest one, is exhaustion. Because the idea of a tunnel itself is already a story, a narrative imposed on chaos so that we can tolerate moving forward without asking too many questions. Schopenhauer understood this deeply when he wrote that life is driven not by reason, but by blind will. Thinking, in his view, does not liberate us. It merely explains the machinery of our suffering. The mind wants reasons. The world offers none. This is where modern optimism collapses. We are constantly told that perspective is everything, that meaning can be constructed, that happiness is a skill. But no one explains what happens when you construct long enough and find nothing holding the structure together. Camus called this confrontation the absurd, not as a poetic metaphor, but as a sober recognition. The human need for meaning collides with a universe that does not respond. And still, we keep thinking. Not because it helps, but because stopping feels like falling. Overthinking is often framed as anxiety, something to be fixed or cured. But sometimes, it is simply honesty pushed too far. A refusal to accept comforting illusions without inspection. Cioran once wrote, "It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, since you always kill yourself too late." Behind the cruelty of that sentence lies a quiet truth. Once you have thought long enough, you are already entangled in existence beyond repair. You know too much to believe. You feel too much to ignore. You think too much to rest. So what remains? For Bukowski, what remained was the body. Alcohol, music, sleep. Not as solutions, but as temporary ceasefires. Classical music does not explain life. It does not promise progress. It simply unfolds in time, indifferent to your questions. And that indifference is precisely its comfort. Nietzsche warned that whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster himself, and that when you gaze long into the abyss gazes back into you. What he did not add is that after a while, the gaze loses its drama. The abyss stops staring. It just sits there, and you sit with it. At this stage, thinking no longer seeks answers. It circles. It repeats. It chews on the same ideas until they lose their taste. This is why sleep becomes attractive. Not because of dreams, but because of suspension. Because for a few hours, the mind releases its grip. Waiting for death does not always come from despair. Sometimes it comes from neutrality, from the sense that continuation and cessation no longer feel dramatically different. This thought terrifies those who still believe in progress narratives. They call it nihilism, pathology, weakness. But nihilism is not the belief that nothing matters. It is the realization that things matter less than we were taught to believe. And this reduction can be strangely calming. When nothing carries ultimate weight, small things regain proportion. A sentence, a sound, a moment of drunken clarity that disappears before it can be explained. Writing, then, is not an act of hope. It is an act of presence. Throwing words into the air like confetti, not celebrating anything, not expecting applause, just acknowledging that thought passed through you and left traces. Kafka once wrote that the meaning of life is that it stops. Not as a joke, not as cynicism, but as structure. Endings give form to what would otherwise be unbearable continuity. Perhaps this is why the idea of stopping does not always feel horrific. Sometimes it feels tidy, contained. This does not mean life is unbearable. It means it is unnecessary to justify it. The demand that life must mean something is itself the source of much suffering. Once that demand is dropped, what remains is not joy, but balance. Bukowski never tried to elevate despair into philosophy. He lived inside it, mocked it, drank with it, and occasionally wrote something honest enough to sting. Honesty, in this sense, is not optimism or pessimism. It is accuracy. Thinking too much does not make you wiser, but it can make you precise. And precision, while uncomfortable, is a form of respect toward reality. So if there is no tunnel, no light, no final revelation waiting patiently ahead, that does not mean everything collapses. It means everything becomes smaller, closer, more manageable. You listen to music, you drink, you sleep, you write, not to escape life, but to reduce it to human scale. And maybe that is all thinking was ever supposed to do. Not to save us, not to enlighten us, but to bring us face to face with things as they are, stripped of unnecessary hope. No celebration, no despair, just confetti falling through the air, marking nothing at all. And somehow, that is enough.